Hi, this is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we're going to talk about the comic market, some high sales, and some alternatives that you could pick up for those high sale books. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. If you've watched any of my previous market videos, this is now the 6th week that I've been doing this, so I've covered a lot of sales data, and you know that what I do is I track the weekly Heritage Comic Auction. I look at anywhere from 160 to now a little over 200 sales per week across all ages, all different publishers, and I estimate the prices that I think those books are going to hit, and I assess the strength of the market based on how those sales compare to my estimates, as well as the number of new high sales that we see each week. So now, honestly, when I was getting ready to put this data together, I thought this was going to be a bad week because the sales that I had watched, because I don't watch the whole auction, it's like 6 hours long, the sales that I had watched were going pretty low, and so I thought I was going to see some low sales data this week. But I was wrong. It actually ended up being a very strong week, and this is why you need to look at all the data and then make the assessment after. So, like I said, I've been doing this for 6 weeks now. This week I priced a few more books. There were a lot of great books this week, so I priced 207 different books, and 58% of those went above my estimate, and that's on the higher end of what I've seen. The low end I've seen is 52% above, the highest was 63, and now I'm at 58. So if I'm seeing above 50% of those books going above my estimates, I'm confident in the strength of the market at that moment. Now, the other thing that I look at is I look at the number of books that went 20% or more above my estimate. And it was a huge week this week. 36% of the books went 20% or more above my estimate. That is a lot. And then I also look at the number that went below 20% below my estimate. It was only 11%. That's the lowest I've seen. That ties with the lowest I've seen. So really strong week. Then if I look at the percent of those sales that were new highs within the grade, 56% of the sales were new highs within the grade. So with me looking at 207 books, 56% of those hitting new highs within their grades, that is significant. And that's, like I said, that's the highest I've seen. I've been hovering right at about 50% each week, and so this was a noticeable jump in new highs. Now, like I said, I did see some weakness in these sales. There were times I was watching this that I saw weakness. So I'm going to talk about where I saw strength and weakness in different segments of the comic market. So I'm going to start with the lower areas. And unlike the last 2 weeks I saw really strong sales numbers with Amazing Spider-Man. This week was a little mixed. There were still quite a few new highs, but I also saw some big books sell for lower than what I was estimating. And this includes issues 1, 6, 14, 101, 129, and 194. So that's obviously the premiere issue, first appearance of Lizard, first appearance of Green Goblin, first appearance of Morbius, first Punisher, and first Black Cat. All really big popular keys. So I was surprised to see those ones go low. And the auctions go in alphabetical order. So this was right at the beginning, and that's where I was seeing a lot of these low sales. So that's why I was anticipating a weak auction, because usually you see really strong sales right at the beginning. The most people are watching, the most people are participating, and you tend to get very strong sales in those lower letters. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. Then I also saw weakness in the Eternals. There were 3 issue number 1s in different grades that sold, all went low, and an issue number 5. I actually bought that issue number 5 because I thought it went for way cheaper than it should have. And then I also saw weakness in Fantastic Four. There were 4 books that went below, including issues 2, 6, and 48. So all big keys. The first Skrulls, the second appearance of Doctor Doom and the Silver Age Submariner, and then the first appearance of Silver Surfer. So those were surprise. Now the one that wasn't a surprise that was weak was Star Wars. There were 7 books that went below my estimate, and I picked up at least one of those. And that was something I mentioned in my unboxing video that I did recently, the $10,000 unboxing. I was talking about Star Wars and that there hasn't been a lot of news about Star Wars lately, so people are starting to not think about it, not buy those books, and so the prices are dropping, and this is the time to pick those up when you see these weaker sales. And the last one was X-Men was pretty weak this week. There were 6 that went below my estimates. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that these were terrible sales, anything like that. It just means they were below what I was estimating them to go for. And like I've talked about in some of my other videos, we've seen real big moves in X-Men. And so I think they're starting to level off, and that's what we're seeing here. When I'm making an estimate on that price, I'm likely to have that book go just a little below that or a little above, and in this case, a number of them went below. Now, for the new highs, so I said Spider-Man was mixed, so they also had 9 new highs within Spider-Man, and 2 of them were actually with issue number 1. So they had 3 copies of issue number 1, and it's kind of strange that 2 went above my estimate and 1 went below. I think the one that went below was a CBCS, so that's just kind of that weakness, the little less demand for those CBCS books. Another one that was really strong, though, was issue 39, and I had talked about that as an undervalued key in my Amazing Spider-Man Top 10 video that I did, and so maybe that one's starting to get a little more attention because it really hadn't moved up as much as a lot of the other Amazing Spider-Man keys. And that's the first time that John Romita drew Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man title, so that's what really makes that one important. Now, Avengers had 2 big sales. Issue number 1 and issue number 4 hit new records. And if you, again, watch my unboxing, I picked up a copy of issue number 1 recently, and it was actually the same grade that sold. It was a 4.0, and it sold for $6,300, so I'm very happy about that. That was a big sale. There was also a huge sale with issue number 4, and I'll be talking about that one later in this video. Now, like I said, Fantastic Four had some weak sales, but it also had some strong ones. It was mixed again. There were 8 new highs, including issue 49. That book again is hitting new highs. That is a really strong book. And issue 5, the first appearance of Doctor Doom, that book is just kind of a freak of nature, it seems. It just keeps going up. But the biggest strength that I saw was in pre-code horror, especially in the EC titles. Haunt of Fear, Shock Suspense Stories, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. Just, this auction had a ton of those books, way more than I normally see, and almost all of them were hitting records, well above what I was expecting them to sell at, so a lot of strength in pre-code horror from what I saw. Now, DC did have a few high sales this week. I saw a couple in Golden Age Batman, in Flash, Showcase, and Strange Adventures, but really still not that much compared to what I saw with Marvel and a lot of those pre-code horror type books. So with that, let's move on to the high sales. And the first one I'm going to talk about is that Avengers number 4. This was a CGC 8.0, big book, sold for $8,400. This is the first Silver Age appearance of Captain America. His first appearances in Captain America Comics number 1, punching Hitler in the face, which is just an insane expensive grail. Cheapest copy you could probably get of that book is about 50 grand for like a 0.5 or a 1. And so this is really kind of that next best thing for it, and it's still not cheap. It's still obviously a very expensive book. I had estimated that this one was going to sell for $7,000, and this was 20% above my estimate, which is quite a bit for a book that's that expensive. And I actually sold an 8.0 about a year ago, so I'm the comparison price for about a year ago for right around $3,900, and so it's up about 100% since then, and for a book that big, that is a significant move. Now, the prior high was just $5,933 from April 13th, so it's up about 40% since then, so that's quite a bit. And the reason I made my estimate at $7,000, though, is there had been some higher sales in the lower grades, so I was thinking this was going to be a pretty strong sale for that book. Now, there are a lot of great alternatives for this book. Another great option is his third Silver Age appearance, and that is Fantastic Four number 26. This is also a early crossover with the Avengers, and it's a pretty affordable book. Lower grades, under $100. Mid grades are in the $200 to $400 range. There was a 3.5 that sold for $125 on May 26th, a 1.5 that sold for $66 on May 7th, and a 7.0 that was just $410 on May 3rd. There was also a 7.0 that sold for $600 on May 28th, so that was definitely a little stronger sale, but as you can see, it is definitely a book that you can pick up without having to spend a ton of money. Now for the next one, I'm going to go to Golden Age Batman, and this is Batman number 3. A CGC 2.0 sold for $3,120. This was a record in this grade, and this is just an awesome Batman and Robin cover. It's that black cover, they're just kind of running on the front of it. Great book. It's not a campy cover at all. And it's also kind of a key. It's the first time that Catwoman is wearing her costume. And I mean, I love these early Golden Age Batman books. I had definitely been watching this one to see where it was going to sell, if I could maybe pick it up, but it went above where I was comfortable paying, because I'm generally not a person that's going to be buying to set a record. I like to try to get deals on books. So once it started getting up into those record levels, that it was not a book that I was going to purchase. And I had estimated the price at $2,400, and this was 30% above my estimate. The prior high was $2,247 from July of last year, so it's up about 40% in less than a year, which for Golden Age Batman, that's a pretty big move. Now, there aren't really alternatives for a book like this. I mean, it is what it is. It's going to be expensive. It's early Golden Age Batman, early appearances, and there's a limited supply of them. It's just there's not that much out there, and so if you have a couple people that want that book that are bidding on it, prices are going to go up. So you can look for other books in that run. They get a little cheaper as you get further out into the, a little deeper into the double digits, but they're going to generally be pretty pricey. You can find some deals if you're willing to get some of the campy type covers, but if you're looking for these books that are like Joker covers or just the non-campy action type covers, they tend to be pretty expensive. All right, now this next one I wanted to talk about because I always look for these books. I'm always watching for them, and I was also watching this one, hoping maybe I could pick it up, but it went really, really high. And this was Rangers Comics number 59, CGC 8.5, that sold for $4,800. Now, this didn't sell for $4,800 because it's an 8.5 Rangers 59. It sold for that because this is an Okajima pedigree. And you may have heard me talk about the Okajima pedigree before in some other videos, because I have one of them. I actually have, from the same run, I have Rangers Comics number 40, and so it's this book here, and you can see up at the top here it says Okajima. That's the pedigree. This is an old label book, and I mean, it is in incredible condition. I mean, this is 1948, and this book just looks amazing. And so I had estimated the price of that book, that Rangers Comics number 59, to go for $1,500. And I felt like I was being pretty aggressive with that price just because of the pedigree, since a 7.0 had sold for $319 just in May of last year. A 6.0 had sold for $204 in November. But I mean, this went for $4,800, because typically you see these massive jumps in the price for books from that pedigree when it's during World War II. Because if you're not familiar with this pedigree, these were books that were collected by a woman that was in a Japanese internment camp in the United States, and she collected those while she was in that camp. The books that she collected while she was in that camp command huge premiums, usually 5 to 10 times what they would sell for if they were a non-pedigree. But this one is from, I think, 1951 or 1952, so well outside the time when she was in that internment camp, and sold for probably more than 5 to 10 times what this book was worth. And now this was also the top of the census, but for a book like this, that doesn't mean quite as much, because there are only 6 graded copies, because there's not a lot of demand for this book. The reason this book sold for so much is because it was the Okajima pedigree, and just incredible. I mean, 220% above my estimate, which just shows that if you've got a couple people at an auction that really want a book, you can run up those prices a lot. And I think it's awesome. I'm happy because I have an Okajima pedigree book. It's one of those books that's on my not for sale list. I have a pretty tight list that I keep on not for sale, and I don't know if I could ever part with it, just because I know how hard they are to come by. Now, this is the only book that's at that 8.5. There's no prior sale for it on record, so obviously this was the record for that book. Now, if you want other books from this run, if you're interested in books from the Rangers Comics run, there are plenty of options out there. They tend to be very affordable. Like I said, those other 2 copies from this run that had sold for $319 and $204, very affordable for good girl art type cover books. Now, if you want an Okajima pedigree book, that is much more difficult to come by. They are, like I said, generally very expensive, and it's also a small pedigree. The total size of the pedigree, I believe, is just a little over 1,000 books, but the total number graded by CGC, is much smaller than that. They believe something around 50% of them are lost. Not meaning the books are gone, but there aren't any identifying marks on them that they could be re-identified as Okajima pedigree books. Some of them have identifying marks that they can pick out and say this was from that pedigree, but because of that, it is a very small pedigree. There are not a lot of them out there, and they are in big demand. I know I look for them all the time. I watch for them on different auctions, and other people clearly do too, because this one hit a major record. Now the next book I think is pretty fun. This is Scooby Doo #1, a CGC 7.5, sold for $2,640, which is a big record for that book. I happen to have a copy of that book. It is a much lower grade than a 7.5, so this one is mine. You can see it's got like some stains down here, creasing, all that kind of stuff, but still a very cool book that I'm happy to have. Now, this is the first appearance of Scooby and the gang in comics. It's a pretty rare book. There are only 259 copies on the CGC census, with 248 Blue Label or Universal copies. And at a 7.5, there are only 37 copies graded higher. So this was a high grade book for that run. And there are multiple Scooby Doo #1s, so if you're looking for them, it's this red one. That's the one that's the first. There's another from 1977 that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $2,400, and so this was 10% above my estimate. This book gets very expensive quickly at the high grades. Like I said, there's just not very many of them at those high grades. 9.4 is the highest graded copy on the census for this book. And this is a Bronze Age book. This is 1970. So a 9.4 being the highest graded copy is kind of crazy for the Bronze Age. I mean, there's no 9.6s or 9.8s. And so that's why this book gets so expensive when you start getting up even into kind of high grades, like the 7s and the 8s. Now, the prior high was just $1,860 from April 19th. So this was a big jump of about 45% in just a little over a month. Now, you can still pick up low-grade copies of this book for a few $100s. A .5 sold for $200 on April 19th, and a 2.5 sold for $406 also on April 19th. But if you want another option, like I mentioned, there was a second series that came out in 1977. I'll put a picture of that one up as well. In that one, a 9.6 sold for $199 on May 11th, and a 9.4 sold for $140 on May 4th. So very affordable book in mid-grades, easily under $100. So that's definitely one that you can pick up if you can't find this book. This one is pretty rare and uncommon to come across. All right, this next one is another one of my favorite books. I've talked about it before because I also have a copy of this one. This is Startling Terror Tales #11. Mine's a low grade. Mine's a 1.8, I believe. This one was a 4.0, and it sold for $4,800. This is one of L.B. Cole's most famous covers. It is an amazing cover. It's super creepy spider on the front, killing those people. That spider is also on the cover of Suspense Comics #8 that was made quite a few years earlier. So this book is from 1952. Suspense Comics #8, I believe, was around 1945. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $3,800, so this beat that by $1,000 or 26%. And these pre-code horror books, like I mentioned kind of in the intro, just keep getting more and more expensive. There's a lot of demand for them. There are not a lot of copies of these books out there, and there were a ton of pre-code horror books in this auction, and most of them went for records, including this one. Now, the prior high for this book was from November 11th, and that was $3,840. And this was a $1,550 book back in 2018, a $700 book back in 2016. So this book has basically been doubling just about every 2 years, which is just crazy. Now, it is a rare book. There are only 96 total copies on the CGC census, with 86 of those being universal copies or blue labels. So you're not going to come across this book very often, and when it does come up, there is definitely going to be a lot of attention on it. There are a lot of alternatives if you're looking for other options for pre-code horror or L.B. Cole. L.B. Cole is estimated to have done over 1,000 covers across many different subject areas, so it's easy to find books that he's done that are romance or sci-fi or horror. Some are more expensive than others. Ones like this one are very expensive, but there's other books from this run that he also did that are much more affordable. Like I have another one of the books from this run, Startling Terror Tales #7, and That one's more in the hundreds of dollars range instead of thousands of dollars. So you can get these books if you want something pre-code horror from LB Cole without having to spend thousands of dollars. Now, for other pre-code books, there's lots of options. Like I mentioned earlier, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, crime suspense stories, a lot of these EC titles. And even the ones that I was talking about that were hitting new records, they were still in the $200 to $600 range for most of those books. So they're not thousands of dollars if you're in the kind of lower to mid grades. You can definitely find those books and pick those books up. So there are a lot of options out there for pre-code horror if that's what you are interested in. Right, now the last book I'm going to talk about, I've talked about a few different iterations, I guess I'd say, of this character, and this is Thor number 165, CGC 9.2, sold for $4,560. This is the first full appearance of him, or Adam Warlock, and I've been recommending this book and Marvel Premiere number 1 for a while as the books to get for Warlock, and they are both starting to get very expensive. He's definitely coming to the MCU, I have no question about that. They would not have put the cocoon and said his name, Adam, at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 if they weren't going to use him. The MCU just doesn't do stuff like that. They don't make references to big characters in the end credits and then not use them. Now, I had estimated the price of this book to be $3,500, and it was 30% above my estimate, so pretty big jump above my estimate. Now, the prior high was that $3,500, and that was just from April 29th, so that's a big jump of about $1,000, or that 30% in just a month. There are a few different alternatives. The one I'm going to recommend here is the second appearance, because I've recommended second appearances in the past. Those are books that, as the first appearances start to get much more expensive, people move on to second appearances, first cover appearances, things like that. The first cover appearance is actually Thor 165, so there is no other option for that one. But the second appearance is Thor 166, and it's a great cover. It's him on the front battling Thor, and it is way, way more affordable. A 9.2 sold on May 17th for $348, so more than 10 times less than a 9.2 of 165. The 7.0 sold for $150 on May 3rd, and an 8.5 sold for $350 on May 26th. So that's definitely one to watch as a good option. I could see that one get much more popular as Thor 165 starts to get out of reach. Alright, so that is all the books I'm going to talk about. This was, like I said, another solid week of sales. I haven't seen anything that's really telling me that there's a drop coming or weakness or anything like that. I did see some weaker areas within the sales this week, but overall, and that's what you really have to look at, the average overall, it was a very strong week. So a lot of great sales, a lot of cool books. I had fun watching it, fun talking about it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.